The Winchester repeater felt cold against Olivia Hartley's ribs as she pressed herself flat against the canyon wall, hearing the distant shouts of the lawmen echoing through the Colorado badlands like wolves closing in on wounded prey. She had never imagined that defending her family's land would turn her into the most wanted woman in 2 territories. But 3 months ago she had pulled that trigger and watched a corrupt land agent fall, and there was no taking it back now. The August sun of 1882 beat down mercilessly as she waited for the voices to fade, her dark hair plastered to her neck with sweat, her cotton dress torn and stained from weeks of running. 23 years old, and she had become a ghost, slipping through mining camps and railroad towns, stealing food when she had to, sleeping in caves and abandoned shacks. The marshals had tracked her from Denver clear across the Rockies into Utah territory, and she knew they would not stop until they brought her in to hang. She waited another hour before moving, climbing higher into the rocks where her stolen mare waited, ground tied and patient. The horse nickered softly as Olivia approached, and she stroked the animal's nose, whispering soothing words even as her own heart hammered with exhaustion and fear. She had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of them, though she no longer knew where she was going or what she hoped to find. Justice had never been part of the equation. The land agent worked for the railroad, and the railroad owned the judges, and her father's body was barely cold in the ground when they came for her. She mounted up and turned the mare southeast, following a game trail that wound through the scrub pine and red rock. By nightfall she would need water, and she remembered passing a settlement 2 days back on a creek, though she had given it wide berth. Now she had no choice. Her canteen was nearly empty, and the horse needed rest. The stars were brilliant overhead when she finally smelled wood smoke and heard the distant lowing of cattle. She approached carefully, leading the mare on foot, staying in the shadows. The settlement was small, maybe a dozen buildings clustered around a wide main street with corrals spreading out to the east. A sign creaked in the night wind, "Park City, Utah Territory." Olivia crept to the creek that ran behind the buildings, letting her horse drink while she filled her canteen. She was about to mount up and disappear back into the darkness when she heard the distinctive click of a hammer being drawn back. "Easy now," a man's voice said from behind her. "I've got a Colt pointed at your spine, and I would rather not use it on a woman, but I will if I have to." Olivia froze, calculating her chances. Her rifle was still in its scabbard on the saddle 5 feet away. She raised her hand slowly. "I am just passing through," she said. "Taking some water. I will be gone and you will never see me again. Turn around, slow." She turned and found herself facing a tall man in his mid-20s, wearing dusty work clothes and a battered hat. Even in the moonlight she could see his face was weathered and honest, with a strong jaw and eyes that seemed to be measuring her carefully. His revolver was indeed pointed at her, but his finger was alongside the trigger guard, not on the trigger itself. "You are far from any road to be just passing through," he said. "And that is a fine horse for a woman traveling alone without provisions." "The horse is mine," Olivia said, which was a lie, but she said it with enough conviction that he seemed to consider it. "What is your name?" She hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. "Olivia." "Olivia what?" "Just Olivia. And you?" "Kane Jackson. I work cattle here, help run the ranch that supplies this town." He lowered the gun slightly. "You are running from something." It was not a question. Olivia felt her throat tighten. "If you know that, then you should let me go. It is safer for everyone. Safer for you maybe. But I cannot just let someone steal water in the middle of the night without knowing why." He holstered the Colt entirely, which surprised her. "You look about ready to drop. When did you last eat?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. She had not spoken to another human being in weeks, had not heard anything but suspicion and anger. Yesterday, she lied. It had been 3 days. Kane studied her for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the buildings. Come on. I have a cabin out back of the main house. You can get some food and rest, and in the morning you can tell me why the law is after you. I did not say the law was after me. You did not have to. He took her horse's reins and started walking. You coming or not? Every instinct told Olivia to run, but her legs were shaking with exhaustion, and the thought of food made her stomach cramp with longing. She followed. Kane's cabin was small but clean. A single room with a potbelly stove, a narrow bed, and a table with 2 chairs. He lit a kerosene lamp and gestured for her to sit while he stoked the fire and put a pot of beans on to heat. He moved with an easy confidence that came from living alone and being self-sufficient, and Olivia found herself watching the way his hands worked, competent and sure. So, he said when he had poured her a cup of water and set it on the table, "You going to tell me the truth?" Olivia drank the entire cup before answering. "Why do you care?" "Because I do not think you are a thief or a murderer by nature. I think you got backed into a corner." He sat down across from her, his eyes steady on her face. "And because I have been backed into a corner myself, and I know what it looks like." She wanted to trust him, wanted it so badly it frightened her. But trust had gotten her father killed and herself hunted. "If you knew what I did, you would turn me in for the reward." "Maybe, or maybe I would help you." Kane leaned back in his chair. "But you will not know unless you try." The beans were warm and thick with salt pork, and Olivia ate 2 bowls while Kane waited patiently. Finally, when her stomach was full and the warmth of the cabin had started to seep into her bones, she told him everything. About her father's ranch in Colorado, about the railroad wanting their land for a spur line, about the land agent who had threatened them with eviction on trumped-up debt. About coming home to find her father beaten and dying, about the agent standing over him laughing, about picking up her father's rifle and shooting the man dead where he stood. "They said I murdered him in cold blood," she finished, her voice flat. "Said I was a dangerous criminal. They sent marshals after me. I have been running for 3 months and they are getting closer. I think they were in the canyon this morning." Kane was quiet for a long time after she finished, his expression thoughtful. "The railroad," he finally said, and there was anger in his voice. "They have been trying to push through here too, claiming right-of-way through ranches that have been here since before the war. They do not care who they hurt. So you believe me. I believe you." He stood and went to the stove, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Question is, what are you going to do now? You cannot run forever." "I know." Olivia felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. "But I do not know what else to do. If I surrender, they will hang me." "Not if you had a witness. Not if someone could testify that the agent killed your father first." "There was no one else there. Just me and him and my father's body." Kane turned to look at her, the lamplight casting shadows across his face. "Then you need to find someone who can prove the railroad has been doing this to other people. Build a case. Show that the agent was corrupt and you were defending your home." "And how am I supposed to do that while running from the law?" "You stop running," Kane said simply. "You stay here, lay low, and let me help you." Olivia stared at him. "Why would you do that? You do not know me." "No, but I know what is right." He set his coffee down and met her eyes. "And I know what it is like to watch the powerful crush the weak and get away with it. My family lost everything to a cattle baron in Texas who decided he wanted our water rights. My father tried to fight it in court and died of a heart attack from the stress. So yes, I will help you if you will let me." She wanted to say yes. She wanted to trust him, but the fear was too strong. "They could arrest you for harboring a fugitive." "Let them try." There was something in Kane Jackson's eyes that made Olivia believe him, something solid and unshakable. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. "I do not have money to pay you," she said quietly. "I do not want your money." Kane smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and almost boyish. "Just your word that you will trust me and do what I say to keep you safe. You have it. Good. Then get some sleep. You can have the bed. I will take the floor." Olivia wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She lay down on top of the blankets, too tired to even remove her boots, and was asleep before Kane had finished banking the fire. She woke to the smell of bacon frying and pale morning light filtering through the single window. Kane was at the stove, his back to her, and for a moment, Olivia just watched him, trying to understand why this stranger was helping her. He could have turned her in last night, could have ridden for the marshal and collected whatever reward they were offering. Instead, he had fed her and given her his bed. "Morning," Kane said without turning around. "How do you like your eggs, however they come?" Olivia sat up, running her hands through her tangled hair. "Kane, about last night, I have been thinking, and maybe I should just move on. I do not want to bring trouble to your door. Too late. You are already here, and I already offered to help." He plated the food and brought it to the table. "Besides, I have been thinking too. There is a lawyer in Salt Lake City, name of Thornton. He has been fighting the railroad for years, taking on cases for folks they have cheated. If anyone can help you, it is him. Salt Lake City is 100 miles from here, and it is full of law. Which is exactly why they would not expect you to go there." Kane sat down and started eating. "But first, we need to make sure you are safe here. You cannot stay in this cabin, too visible. I have a line shack up in the high country about 5 miles north. It is where the ranch hands stay during roundup, but we are done for the season. No one goes up there this time of year. You want me to hide in the mountains, just until I can get to Salt Lake City and talk to Thornton, see if he will take your case. It will take me 3, maybe 4 days round trip." Kane looked at her seriously. "Can you manage that long on your own?" Olivia thought about the weeks she had already spent alone and nodded. "If there is food and water, I can manage. There is both, and ammunition if you need it." He paused. "One more thing. If anyone comes asking if the law shows up here looking for you, I never saw you. Understand?" "I understand." Olivia met his eyes. "Thank you, Kane, I mean it. Thank me when this is over and you are free." He stood and gathered the dishes. "We will leave after dark tonight. Less chance of being seen." They spent the day in the cabin, Kane leaving only to attend to his work and returning with supplies for Olivia's stay at the line shack. He brought her clean clothes, men's work shirts and pants that would be more practical than her torn dress, and a bedroll and cooking equipment. He also brought news. "There were 3 marshals in town this morning," he said, his voice low, "asking about a woman traveling alone on a stolen horse. They showed a sketch around." Olivia felt her blood run cold. "Did they talk to you, briefly?" "I told them I had not seen anyone matching the description." Kane set the supplies on the table. "But they are not leaving. They are setting up camp at the hotel, planning to search the area. We need to get you up to that shack tonight, and then you need to stay out of sight until I get back from Salt Lake City. They will find me eventually, maybe. But by then, hopefully Thornton will have agreed to represent you, and we can arrange a proper surrender under terms that keep you from hanging." It sounded impossible, but Olivia had no better ideas. She nodded and helped Kane pack the supplies, her hands shaking slightly despite her efforts to stay calm. They left at midnight, leading the horses on foot until they were well clear of town. The trail climbed steadily into the Wasatch Mountains, following a creek through stands of aspen and pine. Kane moved silently, clearly familiar with every turn and boulder, and Olivia followed as closely as she could in the darkness. It took them 3 hours to reach the line shack, a sturdy log structure tucked into a clearing with a small corral and a view of the valley below. "You can see anyone coming from up here," Kane said as he helped her unpack. "But stay inside during the day and do not light a fire unless it is after dark, and you keep it small. The smoke could draw attention. I will be careful." Olivia looked around the shack, which was sparse but weatherproof, with a bunk and a stove and shelves stocked with canned goods. "This is better than most places I have stayed recently." Kane smiled at that, then grew serious again. "I will be back in 4 days, 5 at the most. If I am not back in a week, something went wrong and you should run. Head north into Wyoming territory and do not look back. Nothing is going to go wrong. Probably not. But if it does, I need to know you will save yourself." Olivia stepped closer to him, suddenly aware of how much she had come to rely on his steady presence in just 1 day. "Kane, if they catch you helping me, you could go to prison. I know the risks." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture unexpectedly gentle. "But some things are worth the risk." They stood there for a moment, close enough that Olivia could see the lighter flecks in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cold mountain air. Then Kane stepped back, clearing his throat. "I should go. I want to be back in town before anyone notices I was gone." "Be safe," Olivia said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised her. "You too." She watched him ride down the mountain until the darkness swallowed him, then went inside and barred the door. The next 4 days were the longest of Olivia's life. She kept herself busy cleaning the shack and tending to her horse, but mostly she watched the valley below, looking for any sign of the marshals or of Kane's return. She thought about him constantly, about the way he had believed her story without hesitation, about the quiet strength in his voice when he promised to help. She barely knew him, but she trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone since her father died. On the morning of the 5th day, she saw a rider coming up the trail and grabbed her rifle, her heart pounding. But as the horse drew closer, she recognized Kane's bay gelding and nearly sagged with relief. She threw open the door as he dismounted. "Did you see him? Will he help?" Kane's face broke into a wide grin. "He will help. Olivia, Thornton says he has been building a case against the railroad for 2 years. He has testimony from a dozen families they have cheated, including 3 where their agents used violence. Your case could be the one that breaks it wide open." "But I still killed a man. In defense of your home and your dying father, which is legal in every territory." Kane climbed the steps to the porch, pulling a folded document from his jacket. "Thornton drew up a petition for a new trial based on evidence of systematic corruption. But he needs you to surrender voluntarily and agree to testify against the railroad. He says if you do that, he can almost guarantee the murder charges will be reduced or dismissed." Olivia took the document with shaking hands, scanning the legal language that she barely understood. "When?" "As soon as possible. Thornton wants to file the petition before the railroad knows what is happening." Kane's expression grew serious. "But Olivia, there is something else. The marshals are still in Park City and they are getting aggressive. They have been searching ranches and lined shacks. We got lucky that they have not come here yet, but it is only a matter of time. Then we should go to Salt Lake City now." "Agreed. But we cannot go through Park City. We will have to take the high trail over the mountains and come at it from the north. It will add 2 days to the journey, but it is safer." He looked at her carefully. "Are you up for that kind of riding? I have been riding since I was 5 years old. I can handle it." They left within the hour, taking only what they could carry on horseback. Kane led them up an old mining trail that climbed above the tree line, where the air was thin and cold, and the views stretched for miles. They rode hard during the day and made camp at night in sheltered spots where the wind could not reach them. Kane proved to be excellent company, telling stories about growing up in Texas and the cattle drives he had been on as a young man. Olivia found herself laughing for the first time in months, found herself watching the way the firelight played across his features and wondering what it would be like to kiss him. On the second night, as they sat by a small fire in a cave that provided shelter from the wind, Kane asked her about her life before everything fell apart. "We had a good ranch," Olivia said, staring into the flames. "Not huge, but profitable. My father raised horses, beautiful horses that were smart and fast. I helped him train them. My mother died when I was young, so it was just the two of us for most of my life." She paused, feeling the familiar ache of loss. He was a good man, fair and honest. He did not deserve what happened to him. "No one deserves that," Kane said quietly. "But Olivia, you did what you had to do. You protected your home. I killed a man. Sometimes I can still see his face when I close my eyes." Kane was silent for a moment, then reached over and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused from years of ranch work, and Olivia felt something settle in her chest at the contact. "You are not a killer," he said. "You are a survivor. There is a difference. How can you be so sure? Because I know you." He squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe not for long, but I know who you are. I have seen it in how you take care of your horse, how you watch the horizon like you are still looking for something worth hoping for. You are not a bad person, Olivia. You just got dealt a bad hand." Tears stung her eyes, and she blinked them back fiercely. "Why are you doing this, Kane? Really? You could have turned me in and collected the reward and gone on with your life." Kane was quiet for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because from the moment I saw you by that creek, I knew you were important. I did not know why or how, but I knew. And when you told me your story, I knew I could not let you face it alone." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "And because somewhere along the way I started caring about what happens to you, more than I probably should." Olivia's breath caught. "Kane, I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I have never been good at lying, especially not to myself." He lifted his free hand and cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. "You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." She should have pulled away. She should have told him that this was a terrible idea, that she was a fugitive with no future, that he deserved better than someone who might end up swinging from a rope. But instead, Olivia leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, but then Kane's arm came around her waist and pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home. Olivia had been kissed before, but never like this, never with this sense of rightness and inevitability. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I did not want to, but I do." Kane laughed softly, his breath warm against her skin. "We are a pair, are we not? Both too stubborn for our own good. Maybe that is why this works." They sat together by the fire until it burned down to embers, wrapped in the same blanket, not talking much but not needing to. Olivia felt safer than she had in months, and for the first time since her father died, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not end in violence or running. They reached Salt Lake City on a bright afternoon, coming in from the north as Kane had planned. The city was busy and bustling, with wide streets and buildings that seemed impossibly grand after months of sleeping in caves and shacks. Kane led them directly to Thornton's office, a modest building near the courthouse. Samuel Thornton was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He listened carefully as Olivia told her story again, taking notes and asking pointed questions. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and regarded her seriously. "Miss Hartley, I will not lie to you. This is going to be difficult. The railroad has money and influence, and they will fight hard to see you convicted. But I believe we can win this, especially if you are willing to testify about everything you saw and heard." "I am willing," Olivia said. "I just want the truth to come out." "Good." Thornton pulled out another document and slid it across the desk. "This is an agreement that you will surrender yourself voluntarily to the territorial marshal here in Salt Lake City under my representation. In exchange, I will petition for bail and a new trial based on evidence of corruption and self-defense. Kane has already told me he is willing to post your bail if it is granted." Olivia looked at Kane in shock. "You cannot do that. That is your money." "It is my choice," Kane said firmly. "And I am making it. But if I run, you lose everything." "You are not going to run." His eyes held hers. "Are you?" "No," Olivia said and meant it. "I am done running." Thornton stood. "Then let us go see the marshal. The sooner we get this process started, the better." The marshal's office was intimidating, all dark wood and official seals. But Marshal Davis turned out to be a weathered man in his 60s who listened to Thornton's petition with a thoughtful expression. He looked at Olivia for a long moment after the lawyer finished speaking. "Miss Hartley, I am going to be straight with you. There is a lot of pressure on me to bring you in and make an example of you. The railroad wants blood, and they have friends in high places." He tapped the petition. "But I have also heard things about their land agents, things that do not sit right with me. So I am going to grant Mr. Thornton's request. You will be held in custody until your bail hearing tomorrow. If the judge grants bail, you will be released to await trial. But if you run, I will hunt you down myself." "Understood." "Understood," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the fear racing through her. "Good. Deputy, take Miss Hartley to the women's cell." Kane stepped forward. "I will be here tomorrow, Olivia, I promise." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and let the deputy lead her away. The cell was small and cold, with a narrow cot and a single barred window that looked out onto an alley. Olivia sat on the cot and wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to think about how easily this could all go wrong. She had surrendered. She had trusted Thornton and Kane and the law. Now all she could do was wait. The night was long and sleepless, but morning finally came, and with it the bailiff to take her to the courthouse. The courtroom was half full of curious onlookers, and Olivia scanned the crowd until she found Kane sitting in the front row, his expression determined and supportive. Just seeing him there steadied her nerves. Judge Harrison was a stern-looking man with gray hair and wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened as Thornton presented the case for bail, arguing that Olivia was not a flight risk given her voluntary surrender and had strong ties to the community through Kane Jackson. The prosecutor, a slick young man who represented the railroad's interests, argued that she was too dangerous to be released. In the end, the judge sided with Thornton. Bail is set at $500. Miss Hartley will be released into the custody of Mr. Jackson and will report to Marshal Davis once a week until trial. Court is adjourned. Kane was already standing, pulling a bank draft from his pocket. Olivia felt tears of gratitude and something deeper burning in her eyes as he paid the bail and the marshal handed her a release form to sign. "You are free to go, Miss Hartley," Marshal Davis said. "Do not make me regret this." "I will not, sir. Thank you." Outside the courthouse, Kane pulled her into a tight embrace, and Olivia let herself lean into him, feeling the tension of the last 24 hours finally release. "I told you it would work," Kane murmured into her hair. "You did." She pulled back to look up at him. Now what? Now we get you somewhere safe to stay while Thornton prepares for trial. I have a friend here in the city who runs a boarding house. She is discreet and she does not ask questions. The boarding house was a comfortable two-story building on a quiet street, and the proprietor, a woman named Mrs. Chen, showed Olivia to a small but clean room on the second floor. Kane paid for a month in advance, despite Olivia's protests. You have to stop spending your money on me, she said when Mrs. Chen had left them alone. When I run out of money, I will stop, Kane said with a grin. Until then, let me do this, please. Olivia sighed but smiled. You are stubborn. So are you. It is one of the things I like about you. He grew serious. Olivia, I have to go back to Park City tomorrow. The ranch needs me and I have already been gone too long. But I will come back every week to check on you and be here for the trial. I know you will. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. Kane, I do not know how to thank you for everything you have done. You do not have to thank me. He covered her hand with his own. Just promise me you will stay safe and trust Thornton to do his job. I promise. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Olivia felt the world narrow to just the two of them, to the warmth of his lips and the strength of his arms around her. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were dark with emotion. I will see you next week, he said, his voice rough. I will be waiting. The next 6 weeks were a strange combination of tedium and anxiety. Olivia spent her days at the boarding house, reading books borrowed from Mrs. Chen's library and helping with cooking and cleaning to feel useful. Thornton visited regularly to prepare her testimony and update her on the case. He had found 5 other families willing to testify about the railroad's intimidation tactics, and he was building a compelling argument for self-defense. Kane came every Saturday without fail, spending the day with her and telling her about life in Park City. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers and honey candy, and once a beautiful turquoise bracelet that he said reminded him of her eyes. Olivia wore it constantly, a physical reminder that she was not alone. On one of his visits, they walked through the city together, and Kane bought them lunch from a street vendor. They sat in a small park, eating and watching children play, and Olivia felt a sharp longing for a normal life, for the ability to walk down a street without fear of being recognized. What will you do after the trial? Kane asked, as if reading her thoughts. I do not know. I cannot go back to Colorado. Even if I am acquitted, the ranch is gone. The railroad took it. She looked at him. What about you? Will you stay in Park City? I have been thinking about that. Kane set down his food and turned to face her. The ranch where I work is good, but it is not mine. I have been saving money for years to buy my own place. There is land for sale up in the mountains, near where we stayed at the line shack. Good grazing, plenty of water. I have been thinking I might make an offer. That sounds wonderful. It would be even more wonderful if I had a partner. He took her hand. Olivia, I know this is fast, and I know we are in the middle of a legal mess, but I need to say this. I love you. I think I have loved you since that first night by the creek, and when this trial is over, whatever the outcome, I want you to come with me. Help me build that ranch. Build a life together. Olivia's heart felt too big for her chest. Kane, I might be convicted, I might go to prison. You will not. Thornton is too good and the evidence is on your side. He squeezed her hand. But even if the worst happens, even if you have to serve time, I will wait, however long it takes. You cannot promise that. I can, and I am. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Say yes, Olivia. Say you will build that future with me. She wanted to be cautious, wanted to protect herself from more hurt, but looking into Kane's eyes, she saw only honesty and love. And she realized that she loved him too, deeply and completely, in a way she had never expected to feel. Yes, she whispered. "Yes, I will." Kane kissed her in the middle of that park, in front of the children and the vendors and anyone who cared to look, and Olivia kissed him back with all the hope and fear and love that filled her heart. The trial began on a cold October morning. The courthouse was packed with spectators, many of them sympathetic to Olivia's cause after Thornton had spent weeks building public support for victims of railroad corruption. Olivia sat at the defense table in a borrowed blue dress, Kane directly behind her, his presence a constant source of strength. The prosecution went first, painting Olivia as a dangerous criminal who had shot an innocent man in cold blood. They produced witnesses who testified that the land agent, Martin Wheeler, had been a respected member of the community, and that the debt on the Hartley ranch was legitimate. But when Thornton stood for the defense, he methodically tore apart the prosecution's case. He produced documents showing that the debt had been fabricated, that Wheeler had done the same thing to dozens of other families. He brought forward witnesses who testified to Wheeler's violent threats and intimidation tactics. And then he called Olivia to the stand. She told her story calmly, describing how she had come home to find Wheeler standing over her dying father, laughing about how the railroad would finally get what it wanted. She described picking up the rifle and firing, acting on instinct to stop the man who had destroyed her family. Her voice shook when she talked about her father, but she did not cry. She looked directly at the jury and told them the truth. The prosecutor tried to break her on cross-examination, suggesting she had planned the murder, that she was lying about her father's condition. But Olivia held firm, and when the prosecutor asked if she felt remorse, she looked him in the eye and said, "I regret that I had to take a life, but I do not regret defending my home and my father. I would do it again if I had to." The trial lasted 5 days. Thornton's closing argument was passionate and convincing, arguing that Olivia had acted in self-defense against a corrupt system that valued profit over human lives. The prosecution's closing was cold and legalistic, focused on the letter of the law rather than justice. The jury deliberated for 12 hours. Olivia spent that time in a small room adjacent to the courtroom, Kane never leaving her side. She was terrified and exhausted, barely able to speak. Kane held her hand and told her stories about the ranch they would build together, about the horses they would raise and the life they would have. When the bailiff finally came to bring them back to the courtroom, Olivia felt like she might faint. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreman stood. In the case of the Territory versus Olivia Hartley, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Olivia felt her knees give out and Kane caught her, holding her up as tears of relief streamed down her face. Thornton was grinning, shaking hands with people who pushed forward to congratulate him. Judge Harrison banged his gavel for order. "Miss Hartley, you are free to go. This court is adjourned." Olivia turned in Kane's arms and buried her face in his chest, sobbing with relief and joy and gratitude. He held her tight, murmuring words of love and reassurance, and for the first time in 6 months, Olivia felt truly safe. They left Salt Lake City 2 days later, after Olivia had thanked Thornton profusely, and he had waved off her gratitude with a smile and a wish for her future happiness. Kane had already purchased the land near Park City during one of his visits, and they headed there together, riding side by side under a clear autumn sky. The property was beautiful, a wide valley with a creek running through it and mountains rising on 3 sides. There was an old cabin that needed work, but the bones were solid. Kane had already ordered lumber and supplies for repairs, and he had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the initial work. They were married in Park City a month later, a simple ceremony at the small church with Mrs. Chen and a few of Kane's friends as witnesses. Olivia wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Kane bought her, and she carried wildflowers that Kane had picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kane kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. They spent their wedding night in the cabin, which was still unfinished but had a working fireplace and a real bed that Kane had hauled up from town. Olivia lay in her husband's arms, listening to the wind in the pines and feeling more content than she had ever imagined possible. "Are you happy?" Kane asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "I am," Olivia said, and it was the absolute truth. "I never thought I could be again after everything that happened, but you changed that. You gave me a reason to hope. You did the same for me." Kane kissed her hair. "I was just going through the motions before I met you. Working hard, saving money, but not really living. You made me want more, want this." "I love you," Olivia whispered. "I love you too, always." They worked hard over that first winter, repairing the cabin and building corrals and outbuildings. Kane taught Olivia everything he knew about cattle ranching, and she taught him about training horses. They bought a small herd of cattle and 3 good mares, and by spring they were officially in business. The ranch grew steadily over the next 2 years. They hired more hands and bought more land, building a reputation for quality livestock and fair dealing. Olivia proved to have a gift for training horses, and word spread about the beautiful, intelligent animals that came from the Jackson Ranch. Kane managed the cattle operation with the same steady competence he brought to everything, and together they built something that was truly theirs. In the summer of 1885, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told Kane one evening as they sat on the porch of their now finished cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. He was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are." Olivia laughed, feeling tears of joy on her cheeks. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it." Kane pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "You have given me everything, Olivia. A home, a purpose, and now a family. I am the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in March of 1886, a healthy boy with Kane's dark hair and Olivia's blue-green eyes. They named him Samuel Thomas Jackson, after Thornton and Kane's father. Olivia had never known she could love anything as much as she loved that small, squalling bundle, except for the man who held them both and cried tears of joy when his son first opened his eyes. Life settled into a rhythm after that. The ranch continued to prosper, and they added to their family with a daughter 2 years later, whom they named Margaret Rose after Olivia's mother, and another son 3 years after that. The children grew up strong and healthy, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with the ranch work as soon as they were old enough. Kane was a wonderful father, patient and loving and firm when he needed to be. Olivia watched him teach their children to rope and track and care for animals, and she fell in love with him all over again. They still made time for each other too, stealing moments alone to ride up into the mountains or sit by the creek where they had first met, remembering how far they had come. Sometimes Olivia thought about that terrible day when she had pulled the trigger and changed her life forever. She thought about her father and the ranch she had lost, and she felt the familiar ache of grief. But she also felt gratitude, because that moment had led her to Kane, to this life, to this family. She would never say she was glad it happened, but she could acknowledge that good had come from it. Thornton visited them occasionally, always bringing news from Salt Lake City and stories about his ongoing battles with the railroad. He delighted in seeing what Olivia and Kane had built, and he loved playing with their children. On one visit, when Samuel was 10 and Margaret was 8 and little Thomas was 5. Thornton sat on the porch with Olivia while Kane and the children checked on the cattle. "You have done well for yourself," Thornton said, sipping the lemonade Olivia had brought him. "I knew you would, but it is good to see it with my own eyes." "I owe it all to you and Kane," Olivia said. "If you had not taken my case, if Kane had not believed in me, I would be dead. You give us too much credit. You had the courage to trust us, to stop running and fight for the truth." "That is what saved you," Thornton smiled. "And look what you have now. A family, a ranch, a future. That is justice, Olivia, not the legal kind, but the real kind." "I suppose it is." Olivia watched Kane lifting Thomas onto his shoulders while Samuel and Margaret chased each other around the corral. "I am happier than I ever thought possible." "Good. You deserve it." The years passed, each one bringing new challenges and joys. There were hard winters when they lost cattle and had to scrape by, and dry summers when the creek ran low and they worried about water. But they always made it through, always found a way to persevere. The children grew into strong, capable young adults. Samuel became a skilled ranch hand who could outride anyone. Margaret developed her mother's gift for horse training, and Thomas inherited his father's head for business and started managing the financial side of the operation. Kane and Olivia grew older together, their hair turning gray and their faces lined with years of sun and wind. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect. They still stole moments alone when they could, still held hands when they walked, still kissed like newlyweds when they thought no one was watching on their 20th wedding anniversary. Kane took Olivia back to the spot by the creek in Park City where he had first found her. It was winter now, and snow covered the ground, but the creek still burbled over the rocks, and the stars were just as bright as they had been that night. 20 years, Kane said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Feels like a lifetime and like yesterday all at once." "I know what you mean." Olivia leaned back against him, comfortable and warm despite the cold. "Do you ever regret it, taking a chance on a fugitive woman you did not know, not for a single second?" Kane kissed the top of her head. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia Jackson. You and our children and this life we have built. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. So would I." Olivia turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Kane, more every day. I love you too, always and forever." They stood there in the snow, holding each other close, two people who had found each other in the darkest of times and built something beautiful together. The past was behind them, full of pain and loss but also courage and hope. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but bright with possibility. And in the present, they had each other, and that was more than enough. The ranch continued to thrive as the new century approached. Samuel married a local girl and brought her to live on the ranch, building a house near the main cabin. Margaret fell in love with a veterinarian from Salt Lake City and moved there, though she visited often and still helped with the horse training business. Thomas took over more of the day-to-day operations, giving Kane and Olivia time to slow down and enjoy the fruits of their labor. They added a large front porch to the cabin where they could sit in rocking chairs and watch the grandchildren play. Kane carved toys for them and told them stories about the old days, about cattle drives and wild horses, and the time he met their grandmother. Olivia made quilts and baked cookies, and felt a deep contentment settle over her like a warm blanket. On a summer evening in 1905, when they were both in their late 60s, Kane and Olivia sat on that porch watching the sunset. Their bodies were slower now, their joints aching from years of hard work, but their minds were sharp and their hearts still beat in sync. "You remember the first time you kissed me?" Olivia asked, holding Kane's weathered hand in hers, in that cave on the way to Salt Lake City. "How could I forget?" Kane squeezed her hand gently. "You kissed me back, and I knew right then that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. We have had a good life, have we not? The best." Kane looked at her, his eyes still as warm and steady as they had been that first night. "You know, people used to ask me why I took such a risk helping a wanted woman. They thought I was crazy. What did you tell them?" "I told them that some things are worth the risk, that love is always worth the risk." He lifted her hand and kissed it softly. "And I was right." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears, grateful tears. "Yes, you were." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and pink. The ranch was quiet around them, peaceful and prosperous, a testament to everything they had overcome and everything they had built. Inside the house, they could hear their grandchildren laughing, and out in the pastures, their horses grazed contentedly. Kane and Olivia had both been broken when they met, damaged by loss and circumstance, hunted and homeless. But they had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found themselves. They had built a family and a legacy that would outlast them, that would carry on through their children and grandchildren and the generations to come. The fugitive woman had surrendered to the cowboy, but she had not lost anything in that surrender. Instead, she had gained everything: love, freedom, purpose, and a future bright with hope. And the cowboy, who had been drifting through life without a true home, had found his anchor, his partner, his reason for everything. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge, Kane and Olivia remained on the porch, hands clasped, hearts full. They had traveled a long, hard road to get here, but every step had been worth it. Every moment of fear, every trial, every challenge had led them to each other, to this place, to this perfect, peaceful evening surrounded by everything they had built together. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Not the acquittal, not the successful ranch, not even the children and grandchildren who carried their legacy forward. The greatest victory was simply this: two people who had found each other against all odds and had loved each other through everything that came after. Two hearts that had learned to beat as one. Two lives that had become inseparable. Two souls that would be bound together for whatever came next. Kane leaned over and kissed Olivia softly, a gentle brush of lips that held 20 years of love and devotion. She smiled against his mouth and kissed him back, and for a moment they were young again, standing by a creek in the darkness, taking the first brave steps toward a future neither of them could have imagined. "I love you," Kane whispered. "I love you too," Olivia replied. "Always and forever." And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night settled soft around them, they remained there together, the fugitive woman and the cowboy who had saved her, who had loved her, who had given her everything she thought she had lost. The lawmen had hunted her across 2 territories, desperate to bring her to justice. But in the end, she had surrendered only to love, only to the steady, unwavering devotion of the man who had believed in her when no one else would. It was a story that would be told and retold in their family for generations, the story of how Olivia Hartley had run from the law and found love instead. How Kane Jackson had risked everything for a stranger and gained a lifetime of happiness. It was a story about courage and trust, about standing up for what was right even when the world said you were wrong. But most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple, the kind that reminded people that even in the darkest times, even when all hope seemed lost, love could still find a way. The ranch would endure long after Kane and Olivia were gone, a living monument to everything they had accomplished. Their children would carry on their values and their work ethic, and their grandchildren would learn the stories of how it all began. The land they had fought so hard for would feed and shelter generations of their descendants, and the name Jackson would become synonymous with integrity and hard work, and the kind of love that built empires. But on that summer evening in 1905, all of that was still in the future. In that moment, there was only Kane and Olivia, together on the porch they had built with their own hands, looking out at the land they had carved from the wilderness, surrounded by the family they had created. They had been through fire and come out stronger. They had been tested by loss and hardship and the cruelty of an unjust world, and they had not only survived, they had thrived. Kane pulled Olivia close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and wood smoke and home. They had met as strangers in the darkness, two broken people searching for something they could not name. They had found each other, and in doing so, they had found themselves. The fugitive and the cowboy. The woman who had killed to protect what was hers, and the man who had sheltered her when the whole world wanted her blood. It was an unlikely story, perhaps, but it was their story, and it was perfect. The night deepened around them, and eventually they rose and went inside, closing the door on another day in a lifetime of days they had been blessed to share. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, as every tomorrow did. But they would face it together, as they had faced everything since that night by the creek when a fugitive woman surrendered not to the law, but to love. And that made all the difference. The years that followed continued to bring change and growth. Samuel and his wife had 4 children of their own, and the ranch expanded to accommodate the growing family. Margaret returned from Salt Lake City periodically, bringing her husband and their 2 daughters to spend summers helping with the horses and learning the skills their grandmother had perfected. Thomas married a smart woman from Park City who had been a schoolteacher, and they had 3 sons who grew up riding the range and learning the business side of ranching from their father. Kane and Olivia watched it all with pride and satisfaction, seeing their legacy grow and flourish in ways they had never imagined when they first stood together in that small cabin and promised to build something lasting. The ranch employed a dozen hands by the time they were in their 70s, and their horses were sought after throughout Utah and Wyoming territories. The Jackson name meant something. It meant quality, integrity, and the kind of determination that could not be bought or faked. But what meant most to Kane and Olivia was not the success, or the money, or even the sprawling family that gathered every Christmas and summer. What meant most was still each other. After more than 30 years of marriage, they still sought each other out first thing in the morning and last thing at night. They still took walks together when the weather permitted, still sat by the fire on winter evenings, and talked about everything and nothing. They had grown old together in the best possible way, their love deepening with time rather than fading. On Kane's 75th birthday, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren everywhere, ranging in age from infants to young adults just starting their own lives. A massive dinner was prepared, and afterward, everyone gathered in the main house to toast the patriarch of the Jackson clan. Samuel stood and raised his glass. "To my father," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The best man I have ever known. You taught me what it means to work hard, to treat people fairly, and to love completely. Everything I am, I owe to you." Margaret added her own toast. "To Pa, who always made me feel like I could do anything, who never told me that training horses was not a job for a woman, who supported every dream I ever had." Thomas finished. "To Dad, who showed me that success is not just about money, but about building something that lasts, something that means something. You built an empire out of love and sweat and sheer determination, and we are all the better for it." Kane stood, his eyes suspiciously bright, and looked around at the sea of faces, his children, his grandchildren, his legacy. Then he turned to Olivia and held out his hand. "I cannot take credit for any of this," he said as she rose to stand beside him. "Everything good in my life started the night I met this woman. She was running from the law, desperate and afraid, and somehow I had the good sense to help her instead of turning her in. And she had the courage to trust me, to stop running, to fight for a better future. Everything you see here, this ranch, this family, this life, it all exists because of her. Because she had the strength to keep going when everything was stacked against her, and because she loved me enough to build this dream with me." He turned to face Olivia fully, taking both her hands in his. "You surrendered to me that night, Olivia, but the truth is I surrendered to you just as completely. You captured my heart without even trying, and you have held it every day since. I love you more now than I did when we married, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond. You are my everything." There was not a dry eye in the room. Olivia reached up and cupped Kane's weathered cheek, her own tears flowing freely. "And you are mine," she said softly. "My savior, my partner, my love. You believed in me when no one else would, and you gave me a reason to hope when hope seemed impossible. I was running toward death when I met you, and you showed me how to live instead. Everything I am, everything we have built, exists because you had the courage to take a chance on a fugitive woman you did not know. I will love you forever, Kane Jackson. Forever and always." They kissed then, in front of their entire family, a gentle kiss full of decades of love and partnership. And as their children and grandchildren applauded and wiped away tears, Kane and Olivia held each other close and remembered that night by the creek, remembered every challenge they had overcome, every joy they had celebrated, every moment they had shared. The celebration continued long into the night, with music and dancing and stories told and retold. But eventually the house grew quiet as the younger children were put to bed, and the adults dispersed to their own homes and cabins scattered across the ranch property. Kane and Olivia retired to their bedroom, the same room they had shared for more than 30 years, and prepared for sleep. As they lay together in the darkness, Olivia rested her head on Kane's chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart, that reassuring rhythm that had been her anchor through so many storms. "You ever think about what might have happened if you had turned me in that night?" she asked quietly. Kane's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes, and it terrifies me, because I cannot imagine my life without you, Olivia. You are as essential to me as breathing." "I feel the same way." She lifted her head to look at him, though she could barely make out his features in the darkness. "We have been so lucky, Kane, to find each other, to have all this time together to build this family, so incredibly lucky. It was not all luck. We worked for it, we fought for it." Kane pulled her closer. "But yes, we have been blessed, more than I ever deserved. You deserve every bit of happiness you have ever received and more." Olivia kissed him softly. "You are the best man I have ever known." They drifted off to sleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, surrounded by the life they had built and the love that had sustained them through everything. Outside their window, the ranch slept peacefully under a canopy of stars, exactly as it had for 30 years, exactly as it would for generations to come. The final years of Kane and Olivia's lives were gentle ones, filled with quiet mornings and peaceful evenings, with visits from family and the simple pleasure of each other's company. They moved more slowly, their bodies betraying the wear of long years of hard work, but their spirits remained strong. They still made the trip to their favorite spot by the creek when the weather was warm, still held hands and talked about the future, even as their own drew to a close. Kane passed away first on a cool autumn morning in 1912 at the age of 82. He died peacefully in his sleep, with Olivia beside him as she had been for 37 years. She held his hand and whispered that she loved him, and though he could not respond, she knew he heard her. She knew that wherever his spirit had gone, it carried her love with it. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Utah family, friends, ranch hands past and present, people whose lives Kane had touched with his kindness and integrity. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple stone marker that read, Kane Jackson, 1830–1912. Beloved husband, father, and friend. Olivia lived for 2 more years after that, cared for by her children and grandchildren who refused to let her spend a single day alone. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, telling stories about Kane and their early years together, passing on the wisdom she had accumulated over a long and eventful life. But everyone could see that a light had gone out in her when Kane died, and they were not surprised when she began to fail in the winter of 1914. On a snowy February morning, surrounded by her family, Olivia Hartley Jackson drew her last breath. Her final words were, I am coming, my love. Wait for me. They buried her beside Kane on the hill, her marker reading, Olivia Hartley Jackson, 1859–1914. Beloved wife, mother, and pioneer. Below that, the family added one more line, she surrendered only to love. The ranch passed to Samuel and his brothers, who ran it with the same integrity and dedication their parents had shown. The Jackson name remained synonymous with quality and honesty for generations. And on summer evenings, when the light turned gold and the air was soft with pine and sage, family members swore they could sometimes see 2 figures walking hand in hand by the creek, a man and a woman, forever young, forever in love. It was just a story, perhaps. Or perhaps it was something more. Perhaps it was a reminder that love, like Kane and Olivia's, did not simply end when life did. Perhaps it was proof that 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful from nothing, who had loved each other with absolute devotion for nearly 4 decades, could not be separated by something as small as death. The fugitive woman and the cowboy who saved her. It was a story that would be told for 100 years and more, passed down through generations of Jacksons who owed their very existence to one man's decision to help a stranger and one woman's courage to trust him. It was a story about justice and redemption, about standing up to corruption and fighting for what was right. But most of all, it was a story about love, the kind of love that changes everything, that builds empires, that lasts forever. And every time the story was told, whether around a dinner table or a campfire or in the quiet moments between a parent and child, it ended the same way. She was hunted across 2 territories, wanted by the law and marked for death. But when she finally surrendered, it was not to a marshal or a judge or the barrel of a gun. She surrendered to a cowboy with honest eyes and a kind heart, who believed in her when no one else would. And in surrendering to him, in trusting him with her life and her heart, she found everything she thought she had lost and more than she had ever dreamed possible. They built a ranch and a family and a legacy that would endure for generations. They loved each other through hardship and triumph, through youth and old age, through everything life threw at them. And when death finally claimed them, it did not separate them, because love like theirs does not end. It transforms, it endures, it becomes part of the very land they loved so much. The lawmen hunted her, the cowboy saved her, and love conquered all. That was the story. That was the legacy. That was the truth that would echo through the years long after everyone who knew them personally had passed on. Kane Jackson and Olivia Hartley Jackson, two people who should never have met, who beat impossible odds, who proved that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, even when faced with injustice and corruption and death itself, love could still triumph. Their story ended, but their legacy lived on. In the ranch that still bore the Jackson name, in the descendants who carried their blood and their values, in the town of Park City and the surrounding territories where their names were still spoken with respect and admiration. And most of all, in the reminder they left behind that courage and love and trust could create miracles, that one decision to help a stranger could change the course of lives and build something that would last forever. The fugitive woman surrendered only to the cowboy, and in doing so, she found everything she had ever wanted. And the cowboy, who had simply been trying to do the right thing, found the love of his life and built a legacy that would outlast them both. It was a simple story in many ways. But the best stories often are. And the best love stories, the ones that really matter, the ones that change everything, they are the ones where two people find each other against all odds and refuse to let go, no matter what the world throws at them. Kane and Olivia Jackson found each other in darkness and built a life in the light. They were not perfect people, and their story was not always easy. But they loved each other with everything they had, and they never gave up on each other or on the dream they shared. And in the end, what more could anyone ask from a life? What better legacy could two people leave behind? The sun set over the Jackson Ranch as it had set every night for more than a century. The cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures. The horses ran free in the paddocks. The main house stood strong and proud, sheltering generations of family who owed their very existence to a fugitive woman and a cowboy who had dared to love when love seemed impossible. And if you listened carefully on a quiet evening, if you stood by the creek where it all began and let the wind carry the sounds of the past forward, you might just hear them, Kane and Olivia, still walking together, still holding hands, still building their forever in whatever realm comes after this one. Because some love stories do not end. They just change form, becoming legend, becoming inspiration, becoming proof that even in the hardest times, even when all hope seems lost, love can still find a way. The lawmen hunted her across 2 territories. The fugitive woman surrendered only to the cowboy, and they lived happily ever after in this life and beyond, forever and always, until the mountains crumbled and the stars burned out, and time itself came to an end. That was their story, and it was perfect.